How did the Vikings manage the constant challenge of smoke, fire, and daily labor within their longhouses during the long, frozen winters of northern Europe? For communities that endured months of near-constant darkness, heavy snow, and biting winds, the longhouse was far more than a simple shelter. It was a carefully engineered space that balanced warmth, light, ventilation, and productivity. Every element, from the placement of the hearth to the arrangement of sleeping platforms and work areas, was designed to sustain life and labor under extreme conditions. The management of fire and smoke was not a minor consideration. It shaped the architecture, routines, and social organization of Viking households, influencing how work was conducted, how food was prepared, and how families interacted with one another. At the heart of every longhouse was the hearth or fire pit, a multifunctional feature that provided heat, light, and a means for cooking, positioned centrally or slightly forward in the hall. The hearth became the focal point around which domestic life revolved. Its design was simple yet effective. A depression in the floor, lined with stones or clay, contained the fire while reflecting heat outward. Fuel, primarily wood, peat, or dried animal fat, was carefully rationed and stored nearby in insulated chests or on elevated platforms to protect it from moisture and ensure a steady supply. The size and intensity of the fire were modulated according to need, with stronger flames during work periods and gentler embers during rest or sleep. Smoke management was a constant concern. With no modern chimneys, smoke naturally filled the longhouse, creating both warmth and hazard. Vikings developed ingenious strategies to cope with this challenge. Roofs were designed with vents or smoke holes that could be adjusted to regulate airflow. In some longhouses, the central hearth was surrounded by low partitions or raised platforms that guided the smoke upward while allowing heat to circulate at floor level. Families learned to position themselves in relation to the smoke, staying near the fire for warmth but slightly to the sides or higher on platforms to avoid the densest concentrations of smoke. Over time, these patterns became second nature, embedded into both domestic routines and architectural design. The placement of sleeping platforms was closely linked to heat and smoke control. Elevated platforms lined with straw, moss, and furs allowed family members to rest above the cold floor while minimizing exposure to smoke. Adults, elders, and children were arranged to maximize shared warmth while maintaining a sense of hierarchy and order. Platforms were often located slightly farther from the densest smoke, taking advantage of rising heat without sacrificing air quality. This careful spatial arrangement demonstrates how the Vikings integrated comfort, efficiency, and health into the layout of their homes, ensuring that even during long nights of confinement, sleep and recuperation were possible. Daily labor was similarly structured around the fire and its properties. Work that required light, warmth, or both, such as weaving, tool repair, leatherworking, or food preparation, was performed close to the hearth. Elevated platforms and benches provided stable surfaces for these tasks while keeping workers within the zone of greatest warmth. Tasks that generated additional smoke, such as smoking meat or curing hides, were often positioned strategically to combine processes with ventilation needs. The longhouse thus functioned as a complex ecosystem, balancing heat, light, and air to support both survival and productivity. Cooking and food preservation were central to longhouse life, and managing smoke and fire was critical to these tasks. The central hearth allowed for roasting, boiling, and drying, but the intensity of the fire had to be carefully monitored to avoid burning food or producing excessive smoke. Hanging racks, stone ovens, and clay-lined niches were employed to control heat distribution and protect delicate items. Smoking meat, a vital preservation technique during long winters, was carefully coordinated. Smoke-filled zones were tolerated for extended periods to cure food, but family members adjusted their positions and activities to minimize discomfort and respiratory strain. These routines reflect a sophisticated understanding of the interaction between fire, smoke, and domestic work. Animal care was integrated into the longhouse system, and smoke and heat management extended to these areas as well. Livestock, including cattle, pigs, and goats, were often housed at one end of the building or in attached stables. Their body heat contributed to overall warmth, but ventilation had to be maintained to prevent accumulation of smoke and moisture that could harm both humans and animals. Elevated partitions, straw bedding, and careful airflow design allowed Vikings to keep animals comfortable while maintaining safe conditions for the household. The presence of animals inside or adjacent to the longhouse also facilitated access to resources such as milk, eggs, and hides, minimizing exposure to the harsh outside environment. Ventilation was a dynamic daily concern. Vikings adjusted smoke vents and flaps according to weather conditions, fire intensity, and the number of occupants. In storms or extreme cold, smoke holes could be partially closed to retain heat, while in milder conditions, openings were expanded to increase airflow. These adjustments required constant attention and observation, with adults and older children learning the nuances of airflow and temperature management through experience. Smoke and heat were thus not static conditions but actively regulated elements of the household, integral to both survival and comfort. Social organization within the longhouse was intimately connected to fire and smoke. Proximity to the hearth often reflected both practical needs and household hierarchy. Adults engaged in labor-intensive tasks worked closest to the fire, while children and older family members occupied slightly more peripheral areas, balancing warmth with air quality. Even routine activities such as storytelling, teaching, and leisure were positioned strategically. Elders might sit near the hearth to maximize heat and light for reading or instruction, while children listened from platforms slightly farther away. The spatial and functional organization of the longhouse created a rhythm of movement and activity that optimized both work efficiency and social interaction. Lighting, while secondary to heat management, was another consideration influenced by the hearth. The fire provided the primary source of illumination, but its position and intensity were adjusted according to activity. Supplementary lamps fueled by animal fat extended visibility into darker corners or for focused tasks. Reflective surfaces such as polished metal or light-colored walls helped diffuse firelight, allowing multiple work areas to benefit from the central glow. Families became adept at choreographing their movements and positioning of tools, materials, and bodies in relation to both heat and light, maximizing productivity during long, sunless periods. Resource management was inseparable from fire and smoke control. Fuel was precious during the long winter months, and households carefully rationed wood, peat, and animal fat. Fires were maintained efficiently, avoiding excessive burning while ensuring sufficient warmth for work, rest, and social activity. Families stored fuel in insulated areas within the home or in nearby outbuildings, protecting it from moisture and ensuring continuity of supply. Efficient use of heat and smoke thus became a cornerstone of survival, with direct consequences for daily labor, food preparation, and household health. The integration of labor, heat, and smoke management also had psychological implications. Long, dark winters could be isolating and oppressive, yet the hearth created a focal point for community and interaction. Families clustered around the fire not only for warmth but for conversation, storytelling, and the transmission of knowledge. Even work itself became a social activity. Children learned skills alongside adults, shared tasks reinforced cooperation, and the rhythm of chores helped structure time. The longhouse was therefore more than a physical shelter. It was a carefully regulated environment that supported mental resilience and social cohesion. Maintenance and adaptation were ongoing. Roof vents, platforms, and partitions were repaired or adjusted seasonally, reflecting experience and accumulated knowledge. Families observed the effects of smoke on materials, human health, and livestock, making incremental changes to improve comfort and efficiency. Windows, when present, were positioned to maximize light without compromising heat retention, and smoke pathways were adjusted according to wind patterns and occupancy. This iterative approach to living spaces demonstrates that Viking longhouses were responsive, adaptive systems rather than static constructions. Even leisure and cultural activities were shaped by the interplay of fire, smoke, and daily labor. Storytelling, music, and games were performed near the hearth to take advantage of warmth and illumination, and seasonal rituals often centered on these spaces. Cultural practices were integrated with practical routines. Songs and stories conveyed lessons about resource management, hunting, craftsmanship, and social norms, all within the controlled environment of the smoke-filled, heated longhouse. These activities reinforced social bonds, transmitted knowledge, and provided emotional sustenance during months of confinement. The longhouse also fostered resilience in response to emergencies. If a fire threatened to burn too intensely or smoke became overwhelming, families had protocols for relocation within the building, temporary ventilation adjustments, or relocation of animals. Food and tools were organized to allow rapid access in adverse conditions. These adaptive strategies reflect a deep understanding of the relationship between fire, smoke, and human activity, and the recognition that survival depended on both structural design and behavioral discipline. Through this careful orchestration of heat, smoke, and labor, Viking families transformed their longhouses into multifunctional hubs capable of sustaining life under extreme conditions. From elevated sleeping platforms to strategically positioned work areas, from ventilated hearths to integrated animal stalls, every design and routine decision supported the dual imperatives of survival and social cohesion. The longhouse was a living system, responsive to environmental conditions, human needs, and cultural practices, demonstrating the Vikings' ingenuity in engineering domestic spaces for extreme winters. By the height of winter, families had established rhythms that balanced warmth, productivity, and health. Work proceeded in shifts or according to zones. Children learned craft and domestic skills under adult supervision, and communal meals and rituals reinforced bonds and cultural continuity. The longhouse was not simply a physical structure. It was an ecosystem of coordinated activity, where fire, smoke, and human labor were managed with precision to sustain life through months of darkness and cold. As the winter deepened, the routines of longhouse life became increasingly structured, blending labor, care, and social organization in a rhythm that ensured survival and comfort. With the central hearth providing both heat and light, daily tasks were arranged to maximize efficiency while minimizing exposure to cold and smoke. Workspaces near the fire were reserved for labor-intensive tasks that required warmth, such as weaving, tool repair, and food preparation, while elevated platforms and benches allowed other household members to carry out quieter or more precise work in slightly cooler zones. By organizing space and activity according to heat, light, and ventilation, Vikings maintained productivity even during the darkest and coldest months. Food production and preservation were central to daily routines. Hunting and fishing supplies gathered during the autumn were carefully rationed and prepared for winter consumption. Meat was cut, salted, and smoked near the hearth, where smoke aided in curing while providing heat for those tending to the process. Fish were dried on racks or hung from beams to allow airflow, while dairy products such as cheese and butter were stored in insulated compartments to prevent freezing. Meal preparation followed a rhythm designed around energy conservation. Heavier cooking took place during the day, when more family members were active and near the fire, while lighter meals and snacks were prepared in the evening. These routines ensured that energy expenditure was minimized and nutrition maintained for both humans and animals. Children and adolescents played an active role in longhouse life, contributing to labor while also learning practical and social skills. They assisted in milking animals, tending to fires, repairing clothing, and preparing food. At the same time, they observed and absorbed knowledge from elders regarding craft, navigation, and environmental awareness. This dual role of active participation and observation reinforced social hierarchy while providing practical education. Young members were gradually entrusted with more responsibility as they demonstrated competence, ensuring that each generation was prepared to maintain household and settlement functions independently. Animal management continued to shape daily activity. Livestock were carefully monitored for health and warmth, with straw and moss bedding regularly replaced to maintain insulation. Feeding schedules were coordinated with other household tasks, ensuring that both humans and animals received adequate care. Some households practiced rotation, allowing certain animals access to shelter inside the longhouse for part of the day and returning them to outdoor pens during milder hours. This approach maximized the heat contribution of the animals while maintaining hygiene and reducing smoke accumulation around them. The integration of animals into the household reflected both practical necessity and environmental intelligence, as their presence provided warmth, resources, and a constant focus for daily labor. Craft work and household production were essential aspects of winter life. Weaving, tanning, and leather work were performed near the hearth, where heat prevented materials from stiffening or drying too rapidly. Carpentry and tool repair occupied benches and platforms positioned for both comfort and access to light. Families developed routines that balanced labor with social interaction. Children and adults worked side by side, passing down techniques orally and through demonstration, while elders supervised and ensured quality. These activities were not only functional, they reinforced social cohesion, responsibility, and cultural continuity. Winter labor became a means of teaching, bonding, and sustaining both household economy and identity. Lighting remained critical, particularly during the darkest periods of winter. The hearth provided primary illumination, supplemented by small lamps fueled with animal fat. Placement of these lamps was carefully considered, ensuring adequate visibility for detailed work while avoiding fire hazards. Reflective surfaces, including polished metal or light-colored walls, helped diffuse the light, allowing multiple areas of the longhouse to be used simultaneously. Light, warmth, and work were thus integrated into a dynamic system, enabling families to continue productive labor even under conditions of near-total darkness outside. Smoke and air quality required constant attention. Roof vents, adjustable flaps, and strategic placement of elevated platforms allowed smoke to rise and exit while heat remained at floor level. Families learned to read the behavior of smoke, adjusting vents and activity patterns according to fire intensity, occupancy, and wind conditions. At times, the longhouse would fill with a dense haze, prompting temporary relocation within the structure to ensure sufficient air for breathing. These techniques required experience and observation, and knowledge about managing smoke was carefully transmitted to younger members, becoming an essential part of domestic expertise. Social interaction was tightly woven into the rhythms of labor and survival. The hearth served as a gathering point not only for warmth but also for conversation, storytelling, and instruction. Elders and adults imparted knowledge about hunting, craftsmanship, and household management, embedding practical lessons within narratives and shared activities. Seasonal rituals and communal storytelling strengthened bonds, provided mental stimulation, and reinforced cultural norms. Even during periods of intense labor, moments were allocated for teaching, socializing, and play, demonstrating that social cohesion was considered as vital as physical survival in the design and use of the longhouse. Maintenance of the structure was a continuous responsibility. Roofs were reinforced as snow accumulated, walls patched with turf or clay, and floors refreshed with new layers of straw or moss. These tasks were often shared, with multiple family members contributing to ensure that the longhouse remained functional and safe. Maintenance routines served multiple purposes. They preserved structural integrity, reinforced cooperative labor, and provided hands-on training for younger generations. These cycles of upkeep reflected an understanding that survival depended not only on resource management, but also on proactive care of the built environment. The central hearth also functioned as a tool for time management and coordination. Work periods were often aligned with the life of the fire, with tasks planned around its heating cycles. Cooking, craft, and domestic chores were timed so that fuel was used efficiently, heat distribution remained consistent, and smoke levels were manageable. Elders and adults would monitor the fire, ensuring that it was maintained at the proper intensity for simultaneous comfort, productivity, and safety. The fire became both a physical and temporal anchor for household life, structuring the day in accordance with energy needs, labor requirements, and social activity. Conflict resolution and social order were facilitated by the shared space. Close quarters and the challenges of winter could exacerbate tension, yet the longhouse provided a controlled environment where disputes could be observed, mediated, and resolved. Elders or household heads intervened when necessary, teaching younger members how to cooperate, negotiate, and respect hierarchy. These social skills were as essential to survival as heat and food, ensuring that the household functioned efficiently and safely under continuous stress. Resource management extended beyond fuel and food to include tools, clothing, and household items. Each item had a designated place within the longhouse, allowing easy access while preventing clutter and fire hazards. Tools used for craft and maintenance were stored near work areas, while clothing and bedding were rotated according to heat needs and seasonality. This meticulous organization reduced wasted effort and energy, reinforcing the principle that careful planning and spatial awareness were critical components of winter survival. Leisure and cultural practice were integrated into daily life without disrupting labor or safety. Music, games, and storytelling often occurred near the hearth, where warmth and light enabled participation. These activities provided psychological relief from isolation, encouraged cooperation and creativity, and reinforced cultural knowledge. Even during intense periods of work, families created space for shared experiences, demonstrating that mental resilience and social cohesion were essential elements of survival in the longhouse. Education and skill transmission remained central to longhouse routines. Children observed adults at work, assisted with tasks, and received direct instruction in craft, animal husbandry, and domestic management. Over time, they assumed greater responsibility for chores, gradually mastering techniques essential for independent survival. This structured approach to teaching ensured that knowledge accumulated during winter months about fire management, smoke control, and efficient labor was not lost but passed on to the next generation. The Longhouse was thus both a shelter and a school, where practical, social, and cultural education occurred simultaneously. By midwinter, the Longhouse operated as a highly coordinated ecosystem. Work, rest, social interaction, and animal care were interwoven with the management of heat and smoke, creating a rhythm that supported both productivity and well-being. Every family member had a role, and every task was positioned to take advantage of available warmth and light while minimizing exposure to hazards. This complex orchestration of resources, labor, and space allowed Viking communities to endure the harshest conditions while maintaining continuity of daily life and cultural practice. As winter slowly progressed, incremental adjustments were made to optimize conditions. Ventilation flaps were repositioned according to wind shifts, elevated platforms rearranged to improve airflow and comfort, and work zones reorganized based on the types of tasks and number of participants. These adaptations reflected the Vikings' keen observation of their environment and the dynamic nature of longhouse living. By continuously responding to changing conditions, families maintained balance between labor efficiency, health, and social harmony throughout the long months of darkness. Even the management of indoor air quality had broader implications for settlement life. Households with effective smoke control and ventilation not only preserved the health of their members, but also set standards and examples for neighbors. Shared knowledge about fire, smoke, and labor routines contributed to the overall resilience of the community, ensuring that settlements were capable of withstanding successive harsh winters. The Longhouse was thus both an individual and communal achievement, reflecting technical knowledge, social intelligence, and cooperative survival strategies. In sum, the integration of labor, heat, and smoke management within the Longhouse was a cornerstone of Viking winter survival. By carefully arranging sleeping platforms, workspaces, animal stalls, and ventilation, families optimized the use of fire for warmth, light, and food preservation. Social routines, education, and cultural practice were embedded within this framework, reinforcing cohesion and resilience. Maintenance, observation, and adaptation ensured that the home remained functional throughout the season, illustrating the sophistication of Viking architectural and domestic strategies. The Longhouse was not simply a shelter, it was a living system that sustained human life, productivity, and community under the most extreme northern conditions. As winter slowly eased towards spring, Viking families began to transition from the intense routines of confinement toward a more flexible pattern of indoor and outdoor activity. The Longhouse, which had served as the nucleus of survival, labor, and social interaction during the darkest months, now shifted roles. Its function as a heat and smoke-regulated space remained vital, but it became equally a staging ground for seasonal labor, preparation, and community interaction. Families leveraged the lessons of the winter months, applying knowledge gained from fire management, smoke control, and daily organization to support emerging springtime tasks and the gradual expansion of activity outdoors. The transition to spring did not diminish the importance of the hearth or longhouse design. Heat management remained critical during early thaws, when nights were still frigid and snowstorms could occur unexpectedly. Families continued to monitor fire intensity, adjust smoke vents, and position themselves strategically within the longhouse to maintain comfort. The skill of balancing warmth and airflow, honed over months of winter, ensured that households were prepared for both indoor work and outdoor excursions. This continuity reflected the Vikings' sophisticated understanding of their environment and the necessity of adaptability in maintaining health and productivity. Food production shifted as stored supplies from autumn and winter were supplemented with new resources. Early spring hunting, fishing, and gathering provided fresh meat, fish, and plants, while stored provisions ensured continuity in meals. Cooking routines adapted accordingly. Heavy preservation-focused tasks declined as food could be consumed fresh, yet careful management of smoke, heat, and ventilation remained necessary to maintain household comfort. Meal preparation continued to center around the hearth, which now balanced multiple purposes: warmth, light, and efficient cooking, while supporting social interaction and teaching. Craft and domestic labor expanded during this transitional period. Repairing tools, constructing shelters, weaving, and tanning continued indoors, but with increased daylight, some tasks moved closer to windows or into semi-outdoor spaces where additional light could improve efficiency. Families organized labor according to skill, age, and task urgency, drawing upon the highly coordinated systems established during winter. Children applied lessons learned indoors to outdoor chores, while adults managed both human and animal resources to maximize productivity. This integration of indoor and outdoor labor highlighted the flexibility of the longhouse as both a living and working environment capable of adapting to changing conditions. Animal husbandry evolved alongside human activity. Livestock previously sheltered inside the longhouse began returning to pens or pastures, though some animals remained close to the structure to provide heat or protection during cold nights. The careful transition ensured that animals were acclimated gradually, maintaining their health while continuing to contribute warmth and resources. Feeding, cleaning, and monitoring routines reflected a balance between efficiency and care, with family members coordinating movements and tasks to optimize both animal welfare and household energy management. The integration of animals into longhouse life exemplified the Vikings' holistic approach to survival, blending biology, architecture, and social organization. Social and cultural life within the longhouse adapted as well. With more daylight and accessible outdoor space, gatherings, instruction, and storytelling extended beyond the hearth to courtyards, semi-outdoor workspaces, and adjacent structures. Yet indoor spaces remained essential for rituals, education, and intergenerational interaction. The rhythm established during winter continued to influence behavior. Children assisted with chores, observed elders, and learned both practical and cultural knowledge. Festivals and seasonal rituals, previously constrained indoors, could now combine indoor warmth with outdoor celebration, reinforcing both continuity and adaptation within the household and community. Maintenance of the longhouse intensified during this transitional period. Roofs were repaired or reinforced after the weight of winter snow, walls were checked for cracks or moisture damage, and floors were refreshed with new layers of straw or moss. This maintenance was more than functional. It served as a communal and educational activity. Children and adolescents learned construction principles, insulation methods, and techniques for managing ventilation and heat. By actively participating, they gained practical knowledge essential for maintaining the family home and preparing for future winters. This combination of labor, education, and social interaction ensured that longhouse knowledge persisted across generations. Lighting and smoke management continued to shape indoor life. Though daylight hours increased, the hearth remained the central source of illumination for indoor work and evening activities. Oil lamps supplemented the fire as needed, with placement carefully managed to avoid fire hazards while maximizing visibility. Ventilation techniques remained essential. Smoke holes and adjustable flaps allowed airflow to prevent accumulation of harmful fumes while retaining heat. The continued use of fire and lamps demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of indoor environmental control, balancing human comfort, productivity, and safety across seasonal changes. Resource management remained a central concern. Families monitored fuel supplies, carefully rationing wood, peat, and animal fat to ensure continuity through early spring storms or unexpected cold snaps. Food, tools, and household items were rotated and stored strategically to maintain accessibility while minimizing waste or exposure. These practices reflected the lessons learned during winter confinement. Careful planning, organization, and allocation of resources were essential to household efficiency and survival. The integration of labor, fire, and social organization continued to reinforce cultural continuity. Indoor and semi-outdoor tasks offered opportunities for teaching, mentorship, and observation. Elders instructed younger members not only in practical skills, but also in navigation, weather observation, hunting techniques, and household management. Storytelling, songs, and ritual reinforced these lessons, linking survival knowledge with moral, historical, and cultural instruction. In this way, the Longhouse remained both a practical hub and a center of social and cultural transmission. As the weeks progressed, families increasingly coordinated with neighboring households. Shared knowledge about fire management, food storage, and craft practices strengthened community resilience. Seasonal activities, repairing shared infrastructure, communal hunting, and preparation for planting required collaboration, and the design of the Longhouse facilitated these interactions. Entrances, courtyards, and animal enclosures were arranged to allow easy access between households while maintaining safety and efficiency. Social networks were therefore reinforced through both the architectural layout of homes and the patterns of daily life. The Longhouse also shaped psychological resilience. Months of winter confinement required structured routines, coordination, and continuous adaptation to maintain mental health. The transition to spring eased physical stress but required continued attention to organizational routines. By maintaining patterns of labor, observation, and social interaction, families were able to preserve a sense of stability and purpose. The continuity of daily life, coupled with the controlled management of heat, smoke, and workspace, contributed to both individual and collective resilience, enabling households to thrive even in challenging conditions. Craft and household production became increasingly intertwined with trade and settlement economies. Tools, textiles, and preserved foods were exchanged or stored for future use, extending the Longhouse's influence beyond the immediate household. Families applied the skills refined during winter to produce high-quality goods efficiently, often involving multiple members in coordinated efforts. The architecture of the Longhouse, including its workspaces, storage areas, and sheltered courtyards, facilitated this productivity while maintaining a balance between labor, comfort, and resource conservation. By late spring, the Longhouse had proven its adaptability and enduring value. Every aspect of its design, from ventilation systems and smoke control to elevated sleeping platforms, integrated animal stalls, and coordinated workspaces, supported human survival, social cohesion, and cultural continuity. Families had successfully navigated months of extreme cold and darkness, mastering the use of fire and smoke to optimize warmth, light, and labor. These skills carried forward into the broader settlement and seasonal cycles, ensuring that knowledge, culture, and productivity were preserved and transmitted. The Longhouse exemplified the Vikings' ability to integrate multiple dimensions of life into a single functional environment. Physical survival, daily labor, education, social cohesion, and cultural practice were all embedded within its walls. Architectural decisions were informed by experience and observation. The placement of hearths, platforms, and animal areas optimized heat and airflow, while workspaces and storage areas were arranged to facilitate efficiency and adaptability. Ventilation systems, adjustable smoke flaps, and careful fuel management allowed families to maintain health and productivity throughout the most severe conditions. The legacy of the Longhouse extended well beyond its immediate physical and functional benefits. It represented centuries of accumulated knowledge about climate, materials, domestic organization, and human behavior. By combining heat management, smoke control, labor coordination, and social structure, Viking longhouses enabled communities to thrive in Northern Europe, ensuring both survival and cultural continuity. Skills and routines developed within these structures prepared successive generations for the challenges of harsh winters, teaching not only practical survival techniques, but also social cooperation, responsibility, and the resilience necessary for life in extreme environments. Ultimately, the Longhouse was more than a building. It was a living, dynamic system that integrated fire, smoke, labor, and human relationships into a single sustainable environment. Its design reflected an intimate understanding of the interplay between physical space, environmental forces, and social needs. Through careful observation, experimentation, and cultural transmission, Viking families created structures that were adaptable, efficient, and socially meaningful. The knowledge embedded within these homes was as crucial to survival as the fire itself, shaping daily life, ensuring the health of household members and animals, and fostering cultural continuity across generations. Even as the landscape shifted toward summer, the lessons of winter remained evident. Families applied strategies learned indoors to outdoor labor, resource management, and seasonal planning. Coordination, observation, and adaptation, honed through months of managing fire, smoke, and daily routines, became the foundation of broader household and community resilience. The Longhouse had served not only as a shelter, but as a school, a workshop, a social hub, and a strategic tool for survival. Its influence extended into every aspect of life, demonstrating the profound sophistication of Viking domestic engineering and the enduring impact of these multifunctional homes on human adaptation to extreme environments.